Well, the bills continue to add up for coal and commodity producers in north-eastern Australia, estimated at nearly $2 billion now. The Queensland Resources Council say the heavy flooding has cost coal companies about $1 billion in lost production and says that could continue to rise. And the farm industry group AgForce says there are equal losses in agriculture, $1 billion, with wheat, sugar and cotton supplies the hardest hit. Those commodities, as well as coal, are the big exports for Australia. The country produces 2/3 of the world's coking coal used in steelmaking, so fewer suppliers could mean less global steel production as well as higher prices.
Prices skyrocket as importers scramble to snatch up available supplies. The price of coking coal has risen more than 10% from last month, now trading at around $253. But analysts say that could rise above $300 in the coming months as more rains are expected. As for wheat futures, they're trading close to a 2-year high. Fields, railways and roads remain submerged, of course. Well, wheat is twice the price it was a year ago, partly because, of course, that Russian drought amid a severe heat wave there in the grain-growing areas of Russia, and that, of course, prompted the Kremlin to ban wheat exports. Sugar prices, 30-year highs, and the big sugar firms are having to import raw cane sugar to fulfill orders. That's in Australia. Now, the torrential flooding has also dampened the Australian dollar. It's down nearly 2% against the US dollar so far this year, now trading just above parity. Andrew.
Now, in an interview with Bloomberg, Australia's central bank board member Donald McGauchie said the flooding is likely to have a significant impact on the economy and the country's export industry. Commodity traders say they're worried about the long-term impact of the crisis on the country's mainstay industries.
There's two main areas that we think is likely to be affected, and first is the coal mines. And remember, Australia's one of the world's largest exporters of coal, and we know that at least 40 of those mines are flooded now, so that's obviously pretty serious. The other is the farm sector, and the estimates on the damage there are somewhere around $1 billion. Now, that's getting up towards 1% of GDP already, so that's fairly significant. But I suppose in the area the RBA board member was talking about that you mentioned was infrastructure as well, and that's, I think, where there's a lot of uncertainty is about just how much of that infrastructure that's underwater is damaged, and we really won't know that until the waters recede, and we don't know when that is. You just don't know how much of that rail link is damaged and how much of the roads are out of action and the dams are contaminated and those sorts of issues. So that's pretty serious to start with, but also remember that Queensland showed the biggest increase in the pipeline of investment that's coming over the next couple of years. In the last numbers we've seen, Queensland had a 20% rise in the amount of investment that's being done. And clearly if it's underwater, then that investment's not taking place. So not only is there damage, but there's actually investment that would have taken place that's actually not taking place now.
Stephen Walters there. Well, he also said that inflation will be closely watched now as prices for fruit and vegetables rise.
One of the Reserve Bank board members was talking yesterday about this, that it's clearly on the radar, and I think inflation's the main area that they'd be concerned about. And we've seen this before. Remember 5 years ago or so we had the cyclone that wiped out the banana crops, and food prices went up very sharply, and that feeds into headline inflation. And we know that the Reserve Bank didn't hike interest rates in response to that then. And I think it's likely to be the same thing here, that if you get food prices going up, that's not necessarily an argument for raising prices, because it's probably temporary. And while fruit and veggie prices are probably a little more serious in terms of inflation than bananas were 5 years ago, because it does feed into other food and sandwiches and restaurants and so on, so it's a bit of a broader impact. I don't think it's likely to trigger any sort of rate hikes. I think quite the contrary, that if the Reserve Bank was so inclined to hike interest rates in the next couple of months, this makes that much more likely.
Well, until those waters recede, authorities can't place an exact figure on the flood damage. Erin Edwards has more on the effects on farming.
At Yeppoon, growers are racing against rot. This should be central Queensland's peak picking season, providing 90% of Australia's pineapples.
This is our pineapple summer crop. Unfortunately, due to the road closures down around the Bundy area, fruit like this, which you would have harvested last week, is not going to make it to market.
Ben Clifton has 150 tonnes to harvest. The only way to get the fruit out is by barge. More than half his crop will go to waste.
Well, hopefully it'll have a positive effect on prices to offset the impact of the lost tonnes that we're going to have.
Millions of dollars of pines, lychees and mangoes are being shipped south. The first fresh cargo arrived at Gladstone this afternoon. Tomatoes, bananas, cane, cotton and grain are the hardest hit.
This will wipe out some producers.
There are food and fodder drops to isolated properties. It could be weeks before stock can be moved for slaughter. Beef prices have already risen and will go higher.
Not just a Queensland shortage, this will impact on world markets as well.
Floods have already cost the coal industry $1 billion. Miners can't get to work. Coal pits, which aren't full of water, are running out of fuel and oil. And there's no way to transport the black gold to the ports. Hundreds of kilometres of rail lines have been washed away. 18 ships are anchored off Gladstone, 12 more are on their way. Australia supplies 2/3 of the world's coking coal. Even coal that's ready to go can't. Here at the Gladstone port, the stockpiles are too wet and too heavy to be loaded.
They rely on us as a reliable supplier, particularly of coking coal for steel making.
The coal industry will recover. After the 2008 flood, the price of coking coal doubled. In Rockhampton, Erin Edwards, 7 News.
Well, there seems to be still no relief in sight for Queensland. Our meteorologist Jennifer Delgado is at the International Weather Centre. So, Jen, I mean, we've been knowing for some time that this was going to be a very tough period, but when can we expect to see some improvement?
Yeah, you know, Charles, you're right. It's definitely a tough time for parts of Queensland. The flooding there has been going on since Christmas, and it looks like we're going to continue with the potential for some major flooding as we go through the next week, and then even more flooding by the week after that. But right now we are at the major flood stage. Now, to give you a better idea exactly how much of an area is actually affected by this, we're talking the area you're seeing in red. That includes the Queensland coastline as well as parts of New South Wales. Now, the area affected 850,000 square kilometers, similar in the size to France as well as into Germany. So this is a large area being affected by it. Now, I want to show you on our radar right now, if you notice that we are still dealing with active weather. Look at those storms setting up, have a bit of a squall line set up, and that is going to be producing some heavy rainfall, especially in those isolated areas. We'll be seeing those downpours coming through as we go through the remainder of your evening. This pattern is not going to end anytime soon. For the next 24 to 48 hours, potentially we could see 20 to 60 millimeters of rainfall affecting Queensland as well as part of New South Wales. Now, let me show you some video coming out of parts of Queen South Wales. This is out of Rockhampton. This area right here, one of the hardest hit. Now, the problem in this region is they're being affected even greater by the flooding that's happening along the Fitzroy River. Flooding has been going on there for the last several weeks. It looks like we're going to see that river cresting today at 9.2 meters. Now, let me take you back over. Now, while this is affecting Rockhampton, this is not the only time this has happened there. As we take you back in history, I want to point out to you, back in 1991, we actually had the river at 9.3 meters, and as far back as 1918, it was even higher than that, with the river up to 10.11 meters. Again, major flooding is going to continue for the remainder of the week, and then potentially more flooding is going to happen after that. And with the rain on the radar and this pattern setting up, we're not going to see dry conditions anytime soon.